From the earliest days, the local courthouses were the centers of life in the towns and villages of North Carolina. Lawsuits were instituted there, marriage licenses issued, deeds and stock marks registered. In its courtrooms, real-life dramas of life and death were played out. When young J.W. Cannon came to Concord at age 16 in 1868 to look for his fortune, the town was a village of fewer than 700 people at that time. Its main street, called Union, was muddy. There were no sidewalks and no street lamps. The stores of a few professional men and merchants lined that main street. But the center of attraction in the village of Concord was the second courthouse, a two-story brick building located on the west side of South Union Street and near the original location of the first county courthouse, built in 1796 in the intersection of Corbin and Union Streets. That first frame building was very hot in the summer and cold in the winter, but it served the purpose of the county until 1826 when the newer building could be erected. I'm Clarence Horton. On behalf of Cabarrus County and all those persons and organizations that are dedicated to preserving her heritage and her history, welcome to another historical moment in the story of Old Cabarrus, as we meet to celebrate those preservation organizations and a milestone in the life of one of them, the historic Cabarrus County Courthouse. In February 1875, tragedy struck the Reconstruction era village of Concord when that second courthouse was destroyed by fire. Fire broke out in the business district in Lydeker's store and quickly spread to the nearby courthouse and threatened other nearby buildings and houses. Fortunately, the citizens of the town were able to rescue most of the court records and preserve them, but the building itself was lost. Cabarrus County Commissioners acted quickly to restore the necessary court functions. The records were stored in the old vacant First Presbyterian Church building located near present-day Memorial Garden, and court sessions were held at Patterson's Groceries, Grains and Feed along South Union Street. From the moment you enter the historic Cabarrus Courthouse, the architectural details catch your eye. The Cabarrus County Commissioners hired the noted architect George S.H. Applegate to construct the new building. Applegate had designed numerous public buildings and fine residences in the area of Raleigh previously. One of those residences was for Dr. William J. Hawkins, the great-great-grandfather of local Concord attorney Tim Hawkins. He also designed S.D. Hall at Shaw University and the Heck Andrews House, both of which are still standing. The Cabarrus County Commission gave Applegate the opportunity to combine all three distinctive architectural styles of his era: the Second Empire style with its mansard roofs and decorative ornaments, the Tuscan Revival style with tall windows and cupolas, and the classic Revival style favored by Thomas Jefferson. Drawing on what he had learned from his previous buildings, Mr. Applegate combined the three styles into one of the state's most unique and distinctive public buildings. Lots were purchased on the east side of South Union Street from the estate of George Klutz. and work proceeded quickly. In less than a year, news reports indicated the building was almost completed. The original Frame County Courthouse had been moved onto these same lots in 1826, but it was again sold and moved, as were other buildings. A well was dug on the grounds and furniture painted. A large bell was obtained for the tower and a town clock installed. On July 3, 1876, the new courthouse building was dedicated to complimentary reviews from both the public and the press. Before completing his work in Concord, the architect also designed a new jail for the county. The new jail on South Church Street replaced the 1842 jail on the corner of Union and Depot Streets. Trees were planted to shade the courthouse. In 1892, a monument honoring Confederate dead was erected near the corner of the lot. For a time, a wooden fence surrounded the monument, and a fence ran around the edge of the entire property. In addition to court functions, public meetings were held in the courtroom, and new churches organized there. As the county grew, its needs increased. The office of the Clerk of Superior Court was fireproofed in 1901. Also in 1901, a three-story addition was added to the rear of the courthouse building itself. In 1914 and 15, the building was extensively renovated, as was the landscaping. The semicircular sidewalk was installed in front of the building. The old narrow porch was replaced by a Victorian-style porch, and the Confederate monument was moved to its present central location. In 1917, the local chapter of the DAR erected a monument to the Cabarrus County Black Boys, who were heroes of the Regulator War in 1771. In 1939, the DAR also located the granite bases for two columns from the burned 1826 courthouse and moved them onto the property. They are now located on the Mean Street side of the historic building. In 1917, the renovated Cabarrus County Courthouse received national attention as the site of the celebrated Gaston B. Means murder trial. Means, who was the descendant of a very prominent Concord family and the subject of a biography entitled Spectacular Rogue, was charged with the murder of Mrs. Maud King, a wealthy Chicago widower. Means had been responsible for taking care of her investments for several years. He gave the slightly improbable account that Mrs. King shot herself while learning to target shoot. He was tried in this courtroom, which is today's renovated Davis Theater. Campbell Klein of Concord recalls that he covered the trial not only for the local newspapers, but for 16 daily newspapers in New York and in Chicago. The jury verdict of not guilty caused a sensation in the eastern part of the country. Even with all the additions, the renovated courthouse quickly became too small to meet the needs of the local courts and of local officials. County commissioners added an L-shaped wing to the rear of the courthouse and then built an addition which filled in the space between the courthouse and the jail. That's the building that I recall practicing law in when I returned here in 1965. Plans were already underway to acquire the entire courthouse block. In 1967, a citizens committee studied possible locations for a new courthouse and finally decided on the present location. Architect George Griffin drew tentative plans for a new courthouse and recommended complete demolition of the old courthouse to provide parking for the new facility. The effort to preserve the beloved old building began in earnest in May 1967 when it was visited by local civic groups who collected information on the building. They contacted Archives and History in Raleigh, put together a history of the building, wrote letters to the local newspapers, talked to their local political leaders. None of the original efforts met with much success. Fortunately, there was a delay in issuing the bonds necessary for the erection of the new building. And that delay gave advocates for preservation a chance to organize and to again seek to form an independent committee. Finally, in 1973, Cabarrus County Commissioners approved the formation of a group with the purpose of preserving the old building. Historic Cabarrus was formally organized on May 21st, 1973, and immediately began to raise funds for the preservation of the building. They quickly reached 200 members. Local artist Mel Kester donated a copy of his famous painting of the courthouse so that all those who were initial members of Historic Cabarrus could receive a print of the painting suitable for framing. In 1974, Historic Cabarrus opened a downtown office on North Union Street. Alex Patterson succeeded Janet McGaldy as president in June of 1974, just in time to deal with the crisis. By then, the new courthouse was largely completed, and part or all of the old structure had to be removed in order to complete the new building. To minimize demolition expense, the architect recommended that the entire 1876 courthouse be demolished. A compromise was barely reached in time. It provided for removal of the clerk's wing in the old building, with the opening to be sealed using $5,000 in funds from Historic Cabarrus. Commissioners approved the removal of the jail and the 1953 addition to the courthouse, but the 1915 addition was saved. In April 1976, Historic Cabarrus moved its offices into the now vacant courthouse building. Plans were to renovate the entire structure and provide offices not only for Historic Cabarrus, but for the Art Guild, for the Junior Charity League, and for the UDC Museum. Plans were also to use the old Superior Courtroom by renovating it into a modern theater, now the Davis Theater. Although some grants were available, fundraising became the order of the day for the Preservation Society. Constant work followed. Work to restore the building to its original condition, work to secure funds to make that renovation possible, and work to keep up spirits as the cost of the construction and renovation effort continued to climb. With the generous assistance of the City of Concord, the state, and especially the Cabarrus County Commissioners, the renovation effort was successful. The old 1876 historic courthouse has now become one of the most beloved, photographed, and recognizable sites in the entire county of Cabarrus, a monument to the dedication and the vision of those early preservation pioneers. They have now joined their efforts with those of the Concord Museum and formed a new organization, Historic Cabarrus Association, many of the same goals as the previous organizations had. Both would cordially invite you to visit their offices in the historic courthouse and to see the exhibits that track the effort and progress made in the preservation of the old building, as well as exhibits related to wartime. All of us can be proud of this beautiful building, for it serves as an enduring legacy to our children and to their generations. And it reminds us of a distant and simpler time here in this special place, this Cabarrus. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again real soon.